Hello there. Today I spent most of the day in Malmesbury, a market town in the Southern Cotswolds in the county of Wiltshire. It's a wonderful and very pretty town, with the central draw being its famous Abbey. Malmesbury is also the HQ for Dyson, the founder of which, James Dyson, is a well-known Brexiteer. I was there in the town hall with about 50 other people to attend a conference discussing a wide-ranging set of topics that many believe will become the next big thing after Brexit. These range around four main subject areas: proportional representation, free speech, an English Parliament and reform of the House of Lords. The 10 speakers gave a good account of themselves, some of which I agreed with, but some I did not agree with, but that is what these events are all about. The speeches were filmed separately, and I will link to them in the description box below once they are available on YouTube. After the meeting I managed to catch up with a couple of the speakers. The first of these was Colin Jordan of Make Votes Matter.
Hello, today I'm with Colin Jordan from Make Votes Matter. Now, Colin, you're with Make Votes Matter, and this is all about proportional representation. Can you just tell us a little bit more about it and where you're going with this and what you'd like to see?
Yes, of course. Thanks. So I'm Colin Jordan, co-founder and facilitator for Make Votes Matter, the national movement for proportional representation in the House of Commons. It's a cross-party movement, so we're completely inclusive, and we're focused on the principle that seats should match votes. So if a party gets 20% of the vote, they should get 20% of the seats. It's just the normal way that democracy is done in most of the democracies in the world. So 85% of developed democracies already use forms of proportional representation. It's about the people being in charge. So we've just been at an event about democracy post-Brexit. And for me, proportional representation is about taking back real control as close to home as possible and every voice being heard.
Okay, and are you getting support from the major parties? Because they're the only ones who are going to have to push any legislation through that will actually make this effective.
Yeah. So the Make Votes Matter alliance already includes all the opposition parties in Great Britain aside from Labour, and we also have lots of Labour support. So we currently have about 80 Labour MPs who support proportional representation, including the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell. And it's absolutely key, as you've identified, that one of the two biggest parties does support PR if we're going to bring it in. And we think that Labour is the party who will do that. There's a big sea change happening within the party, with lots of motions being raised by constituency Labour parties. So once they join with all of the other opposition parties in demanding real democracy, then we can make it happen.
Do you think it will get onto the parliamentary business and get through people like the House of Lords as well? Because have you seen, if they don't like something, they'll obstruct it, and PR may not be quite what they want, because then there'll be a push to develop democracy further through the United Kingdom. So there'll be a lot of people working against you on this.
Yes, I mean, that is the case, but we do know that the vast majority of the population support proportional representation. All polls in the last few decades show a majority in favour of PR. It is a big job. There are vested interests against it, you're absolutely right. But it is worth noting that people have been campaigning hard for proportional representation for over 130 years. So there's been a lot of groundwork done, and we're kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, as the phrase goes, and we can see that there's real tangible opportunity now, and we think we can make it happen in years rather than decades.
Okay, and some people will say, well, we've had a referendum on it, we just rejected it, what's the point?
So the interesting thing about the referendum in 2011 was that it was on a system called the alternative vote, which is not a proportional system. And the other interesting thing about it is that nobody was calling for that. It was a compromise, and that's not to say compromises are always bad, but in that instance it resulted in a referendum for something which nobody particularly wanted, and the turnout reflected that. It was very low. And in fact there was a vote in Parliament in which it was proposed that proportional representation would be included on that ballot paper, and it was turned down by the MPs at the time, the majority of the MPs, not all of them. So we're looking to change the position amongst the MPs to end up with a majority in support of PR, and we think that's achievable.
I remember that referendum myself, and I always argued that what should have come first was an actual vote on doing PR. Then we should have addressed the actual system. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a very sensible route. That's exactly what happened in New Zealand. So in 1996, New Zealand moved from first past the post to proportional representation. If I'm remembering the date right, I think it was 1996. But they certainly had a two referendum process where, first of all, they asked if people wanted to stay with the current system or change to a different one. And then they asked which system people wanted to move to. And it was very overwhelmingly in favour of what they called mixed member proportional there, which we often refer to as the additional member system. And that's already in use in the London Assembly, in Scotland, in Wales, in Germany as well. So it's kind of tried and tested.
Yes, and it's also used in the Police and Crime Commissioner elections that have just started up recently in the last, 7 or 8 years.
So they actually use a slightly different system. This is the trouble with voting systems, that there's this huge range of them. And as soon as we start talking about them, we could talk about them all day. So we like as much as possible to keep it focused on the principle that seats should match votes. And not very many people can disagree with that. There may be some elected and unelected representatives who do disagree with it, but we're working to change their minds.
So what's the next move by your organisation? What are you going to do? What's the next event?
So the next big thing we're doing is Demand Democracy Day. That's in response to the government saying that we all should celebrate British democracy with the National Democracy Week in the first week of July. And our perspective is that when 68% of votes are wasted, as they were in the last general election, we don't have a real democracy and we need to work to improve it. So our Demand Democracy Day is going to come just before that week on the 30th of June. And we're going to have people all over the country out campaigning with street stalls, getting people to sign petitions to their MPs, and then arranging meetings with their MPs to demand that we move to a better democracy.
So the final question is, how can the ordinary person get involved? Where do they go? What telephone number? What email address? What website? What could you tell us?
Sure. So the campaign is Make Votes Matter. If you Google just that, you will immediately come to our website. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook. You can find all the contact details on the website there. The homepage will always have the most relevant information about the next upcoming campaign. So it's a very quick way to find out what's happening.
Thank you very much, Kleiner Jordan, for Make Votes Matter. Thank you.
The second speaker I talked to was Colin Becks of the Wessex Regionalists, who believes in an autonomous region for the south and southwest of England.
Hello, I'm now with Colin Becks from the Wessex Regionalists. Now, if I could just ask you, Colin, tell us a bit about yourself and your organisation.
Yes, well, the Wessex Regionalists grew out of an organisation called the Wessex Movement, which was founded by Alexander Weymouth in 1973. I was invited to join then. I joined and we stood for Parliament over a number of years then, and I've been standing ever since. I've stood 8 times so far on my own and campaigning for a Wessex region with autonomy over its own affairs.
So when you talk about autonomy, you mean its own parliament and its own politicians and its own civil service to be able to run itself completely independently, basically from the UK, as it were?
Well, yes, from the UK, but in fact it would be, of course, a region of England, and of course the history of the Wessex region is one of the most significant. And so, but the important thing we need is to have sovereign power in the parishes, not on the head of a monarch. Of a dynasty. And this is going to be the key change, because if this doesn't happen, this current system will fight like a viper to its death, and it'll still be fighting when it's had its head cut off.
Okay, so how do you see this moving forward? What would you like to see happen to make your dream come alive?
Well, what I would like to see, first of all, is to get a membership of sufficient number to reach a tipping point where we can have a candidate standing for every one of the 8 counties, preferably more, because there are more constituencies obviously than there are counties. But I'd be very happy to see a member standing in each county with me in one of them, and to gradually get the votes, because if we get proportional representation, which is we're hoping for and which is this conference has been all about, then people will begin to realise they can vote for something which will bring influence and hopefully power down to where it belongs.
Yes, how do you see a sort of an overarching English Parliament being involved at all, if at all? Do you see that?
My problem with that, I've heard some very convincing arguments, very persuasive arguments for it, but first of all it would be asymmetric in the sense that it would be the biggest landmass of the other regions, I regard Scotland and Wales as regions. That's what they are geographically. And just because one still calls itself a nation state and the other calls itself a principality, it doesn't mean it's any more than the land it's on. And I'm saying that we need the land regions which were founded in the first millennium. I think in the 800s the counties' boundaries were drawn up. I hope I'm right on that. And that I want to see those boundaries restored as far as is practicable and makes sense with the numbers. But if you have an English Parliament, the danger is it'll still be top-down diktat, and you will have the same problem in a different guise.
Okay, how would you see sort of taxation matters being dealt with in your sort of system? Would they be collected locally and then disseminated upwards, or how would that work?
Well, I've got news for you. The whole financial system at the moment, the global system, is a complete charade. Do you know that only 3% of what is called money exists in the terms of coins? That means 97% doesn't exist. You say, yes, it does. Yeah, how does it exist? As numbers on computer screens. So any hacker now should be able to hack into any account with a huge lot of numbers on it, takes them off. So I'm saying this is a total fraud. It's being used and abused by criminals and psychopaths around the world, and they do their dirty laundry in our country. And people like Cameron and Johnson are delighted. Mustn't have the City of London not being the global money laundering centre of the world. I'm saying no. We would decree by the Wessex Regional Parliament would be bound to provide enough money for people to have a living income, not a wage. We'd even subtract anything about work and money. We'd keep the two separate. Everyone alive would be able to live on their own account with this money, which would by law have to be provided by the Parliament and by the Bank of Wessex, because it would have its own currency probably.
So we're talking about a citizen's wage here, if the Swiss are looking at and various others.
Yeah, not a wage. You see, I'm trying to get away from this idea that you get paid for what you do, because a lot of damage is done. Indeed, most of the damage which is done to the environment is done because it makes other people rich. The directors of these bulldozing companies. If you look at a nation's stock of bulldozers at any one time, you can get a picture of how much damage is going to be done for money. And you see, if people don't have to go do that for money, they wouldn't do it. So I think if people are given independence, an independent income by right, people would choose what to do and they wouldn't have to do what they're told to do.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. But on the basis of going forward with the Wessex plan, how do people get involved, presumably in the Wessex region? Who do they contact and what do they do?
Right. Well, I will say I will read my email address out, and I will say that my address is my name is Colin Becks. My address is regionalist singular at Wessex Bureau. That's WESSEXBUREAU.net. And if you email me at that address, I will give you the information you need.
Thank you very much, Colin.
Please do like and share this video, and also subscribe to my channel. And when subscribing, please do remember to press on the little bell next to the subscribe button. That way you'll get an alert every single time I put up a new video. Thank you very much for watching.